I got nightmares in my head, I fear. Thoughts build up until I can't hear. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear. The thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts
Breaking
me
news
somewhere
on the
much
Idaho
deeper.
quadruple murder case. The court granted the suspect, Bryan Kohberger's request to move that trial out of Letby County. That is where the 2022 killings took place, in an off-campus house near the University of Idaho campus.
Now, in this ruling, the judge sided with the defense, which argued that jurors from Letby County would most likely have been biased because of this intense media coverage that's been surrounding the trial. NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalas joins us now. Danny, I think
Okay, hi guys. So yeah, that's the sort of biggest story, arguably, for the moment. Bryan Kohberger trial moved to Ada County. I've actually attended that. I've been in that court several times. I used to have a lot of the tickets somewhere around here. I think I've had them framed, and that's where they are at the moment. But I'm certainly tempted to go and attend that trial simply because I know that courtroom, I know Boise. My only reservations are it's quite difficult to cover the trial when you're in the courtroom. To you guys, do you know what I mean? It's also going to be lasting 3 months, so that's kind of another aspect to consider. How's everyone doing? We are going to need to move quite quickly if we're going to get this sorted in under an hour. But let's see what we can do. Just a quick hello to everyone. Chelsea, thanks for being here. Chelsea's moderating. Liesel McGuire, D. Patterson Earth, good to see all of you. Let's listen a bit further to what they say here.
a lot of people were surprised by this decision. I mean, at the end of the hearing about this change of venue request last month, the judge said that this would be the most difficult decision of his career. What did you make of the ruling?
So are you guys surprised by this ruling? It's kind of been ping-ponging in the court for months, that there's going to be a, did they call it a contaminated jury? But basically, you know, doing it inside Moscow is going to be difficult because of the high profile nature of this case. And I have to say, more and more, it feels like almost every single high profile trial is being seriously sort of jeopardized by the mere fact that it's high profile. Aren't you getting that impression that it's almost every single case has got is dealing with the difficulty of the media and social media? Think about the Delphi case. Think about so many trials that are sort of trying to kind of get going. We're going to deal with Barry Morphew in a moment, but I mean that entire, you know, the DA has basically just been disbarred because she participated with a true crime channel. I mean, it's not an exaggeration to say that. So, you know, what do you guys think? Do you think a trial being high profile or a case being high profile, is that good for justice or bad for justice? In other words, a criminal investigation that catches the attention of social media and becomes high profile, is that going to be good for justice? Is that usually good for justice? What do you guys think? Robbie Robin, thanks for that. Okay, thanks a lot for that. Thank you. Well, that's quite an interesting point, and thanks for your earlier super chat, Tanny. What do you guys think? isn't it supposed to be a trial by jury of your peers? Now, I tend to think of that as a jury of your kind of contemporaries. In other words, people who are around in at the same time that you are. I don't know whether it's unfair. I don't know whether it's fair to say that your peers are any different. Is it 300 miles away? I should really know because I've driven from, I'm imagining it now, Moscow to Boise. You basically drive south. I think you go across, do you go across the 45-degree parallel? But you go through quite a deep canyon. It's quite rocky, but it's still in the same state, and Idaho is quite a small state. So it's certainly in the same state, are people that different? So, I still think, I think it still is a jury of one's peers. I do think it is strange if you think about it. In this case, they're trying to get people to forget everything in the sense of demolishing the house. They're trying to disassociate the trial for the sake of justice by moving it somewhere else. Again, it's just you get the sense of the creep of a high profile case and how it is not very good for to prosecute, it's really the wrong word, not to prosecute, put that case on trial. We've just seen exactly the same thing taking place in the Alec Baldwin scenario. Okay, let's listen to the rest here.
Most of these change of venue motions are denied. However, it's really a two-part burden on the defense. I mean, they essentially have to show that they can't get a fair trial in this county, in Latah County, but also that another county would be better. And the defense really marshaled the expert testimony and evidence in this case. They got some top experts, including an expert who conducted surveys, who really met that burden. And it is not an easy burden to meet, especially in the modern era where jurors in virtually any county, in any state, or even any country can look on their cell phone and learn all about the Bryan Kohberger case. So this is a surprise in the sense that these motions are not normally granted, but if
No sound. Okay. Sorry about that.
If there was a case to be made, the defense really put up a Herculean effort by getting together multiple experts to show through surveys and through psychological expert testimony that another county would be better than this county.
Yeah, this case has been so widely covered nationally, even internationally, Danny. The final decision, we understand, will now be left up to Idaho's highest court. Do you think they will side with this judge?
It's possible they will show some degree of deference to the judge's determination, but ultimately, the question remains where it's going to be transferred to for venue. But yes, I mean, they could overturn a judge's decision on this issue, but they're likely to show some deference. And
so what we have heard, sorry about the sound thing there. I'm not going to repeat what I've just said. Don't have time for that. But basically, it is something that the judge said was his most difficult decision. I'm just trying to see where I can find it here. So they just say, due to concerns that the local community in Moscow is prejudiced against him. I must say, I don't think there's any. I tend to agree with that assessment. I think it would be surprising for that not to be the case. I just want to have a look at where he says was the most difficult. He says there's a reasonable likelihood that prejudicial news coverage will compromise a fair trial in Letby County because of inflammatory publicity. So yeah, you have it. The court has spent many months carefully considering the legal and logistical concerns. And he says, based on the totality of factors, the defendant's motion for a change of venue is granted. I just want to see where he says, it's the most difficult decision he's made in his career. Let's see if I can find it. So yeah, the trial is expected to begin in June 2025. I'm considering pitching up there. As I say, I've attended the courtroom in Boise. I think it's very likely to be moved to Boise. It's a big courtroom, and they've handled Lori Vallow and Shade Bell in the past. That's brought up over here. Can't quite find this. This where he mentions it's the most difficult decision. There it is. Okay. The judge said it was the most difficult decision of his career, and that he would study the law and arguments before he rules. Now, I must say, he definitely has my sympathy, because if you think about it, this is a trial and a legal issue that is affecting his community. He became a judge to adjudicate and to bring justice to his community. And now he's got to basically wash his hands and say, somebody else deal with this. And, does he care about his community? Does he know his community? Okay, come on. Yep. Come. So, it must be very frustrating for someone like a judge to have to say, I care about this case. I really want to deal with this case, and I'm going to hand it over because if I'm honest, I must admit it is being prejudiced by media coverage, right? And so due to the presumption of prejudice, I'm going to hand it over to someone else. That must be really frustrating. Yvonne says it's sad that this decision wasn't made earlier. It does seem like it's been like a long period of arguing about this in particular. Okay, so that is the Kohberger case. And I kind of want you guys to think about just what I've said in terms of this case. Let's see if I can just do that. As we deal with other cases, just think about, and obviously they're all high profile, think about this idea of that high profile trials aren't good for justice. And I think another way, maybe I haven't expressed it very well, a criminal case that is elevated to the point, where the public interest is such that it becomes high profile, that tends to be bad for justice. That tends to undermine, tends to be a major burden, additional burden on that case. And I remember when I first covered true crime from the Oscar Pistorius case, thinking, awesome, the fact that this case is high profile means that justice is assured, right? Well, it's really not my day. Someone says, is the connection buffering? I feel like it's like 3 strikes and you're out. If there are going to be any further issues, the reason I muted the live now was just to turn off my alarm, and then I forgot to turn it back on. But the Karen Reid trial definitely does come to mind. Is anyone else having any problems? I don't mind just ending right here, if that's the case. But in terms of think about high profile trials and what the ultimate end result is of them. Think about Madeleine McCann, JonBenet Ramsey, pretty much all cases. That it seems like quite a hard slog to get to justice in the end. And you'd almost think, why isn't it the opposite? With everyone watching, why isn't it more the opposite, that you can't get away with murder, that people can't get away with things? It's quite strange, isn't it? So the next thing we're going to deal with is Madeleine McCann. I just want to see if I can get the images that I'm looking for. Just a second. I really do need a producer. Okay, yeah, they are. Timmy, stop snoring. Okay, here it is. Timmy actually smells, and that's no exaggeration. He was running through some thick black mud, like black goo, yesterday. So I'm not terribly happy with having him on my lap, but he's pretty happy. Oh, so you do cross the 45th. Okay, so let's go into Madeleine McCann, and we're just going to deal very quickly with Ernest Bruckner. Is it Christian Bruckner? Just get to that. So there you have it. Madeleine McCann suspect Christian Bruckner bragged about all of that, right? And what I really want to sort of communicate here is, if you think about just how absurd this whole thing is, the British media keep referring to him as Madeleine McCann suspect, and then they talk about some other case. Madeleine McCann suspect, and then they talk about something else that he's done. He's not on trial for anything related to Madeleine McCann. In fact, he's not even been charged for anything related to Madeleine McCann. Now, again, think about what I've just said. You have a high-profile case, in this case, Madeleine McCann, and now look at to what extent Christian Bruckner's trial is being contaminated deliberately by the media, in this case, by the British media. Now, I definitely don't have any sympathy. It's not like I'm on Christian Bruckner's side. I'm on the side of justice. I'm on the side of truth, right? But so I certainly don't have any sympathy for him. But one thing that I also don't have sympathy for is the sort of mischievous attitude where you have the British media going, oh, people are interested in Madeleine McCann. There's not really any news on Madeleine McCann, so let's generate news. Let's artificially contrive news by doing this. Madeleine McCann suspect Christian Bruckner this. Madeleine McCann suspect Christian Bruckner that. And it's got nothing to do with Madeleine McCann. And that's what I mean by, think about just how the high profile nature really fucks it all up in a way. And whose fault is that? As far as I'm concerned, the fact that the British media are able to do this, they've been doing it for 2 years now, is I would say partly it's the British public that are to blame, who number one, aren't thinking critically about this, and number two, allow this to happen. They want to read these stories. No one's really holding the British media accountable. I find it extremely mischievous. And that is besides just the whole thing that we're talking about here. So in his current trial, can you guys see that? In his current trial, Bruckner is accused of 5 offenses, which include that and that in terms of children. Now, is there anyone here that seriously believes that Christian Bruckner should be a suspect in the Madeleine McCann case? Is there anyone here that is like, I believe that he is the prime suspect? Anyone here? Let's just see what you guys are saying. Bria, good to see you. So there he is. I think his lawyer was actually attacked by a dog not that long ago. Definitely not Germany's most upstanding citizen, to put it mildly. So this is what I want to bring to your attention, just this slide. Let's just get there in a second. That's just another picture of him. Apparently his lawyer was attacked by a dog. I'm not sure if it's this guy. Bit his hand, attacked by his own dog, apparently. But this is what I want to quickly just draw to your attention. I don't think the British media would do this. Okay, so can you see on this graphic, it's showing kind of a chronology of events. Number 1, a 14-year-old girl. Number 2, where's number 2? I can see number 4 and 3. Am I missing something? 1. Guys, where's number 2? 1, 4, 5, 3, 6. I don't know. Am I missing something? Anyway, the point that I want to make with regard to this kind of infographic is, look at that over there. Can you guys see where my cursor is circling? You see this this event. So there is Pride Illusion. I've actually been there. And then some distance away, you have something else happening. And it happened in June 2007, right? When did Madeleine McCann disappear? Anyone know? When did Madeleine McCann disappear? Well, there you have it on the same graphic. May 2007, right? Now, just think about this logically. If this guy is the suspect in Madeleine McCann's disappearance and this blew up, it went like international. I mean, by the end of the month, there was like this massive police investigation for Madeleine McCann. And you would imagine whoever was involved in that would want to lie low, would want to be cautious, kind of thing. And yeah, you have Bruckner involved in some incident in June 2007, 1 month later. Now, I suppose you could also argue, if this person is such a, I don't know, depraved individual that he couldn't help himself, I suppose that's another argument. But the counter argument to that is, if he had killed Madeleine and this unleashes this massive investigation, then by committing another crime barely a month later, he's drawing attention to himself. Even serial killers don't really do that. They tend to kind of wait for things to sort of settle down, to a point anyway. But does that make sense to you that if he is the perpetrator, would he just commit a crime a month later, kind of thing? Just something worth thinking about. Yeah, I do too. And so I can't help thinking that the strategy employed by the German authorities is basically, we are trying to prosecute you. We have quite a lot of evidence against you, but it doesn't really meet a certain threshold. So in order to tighten the screws, in order to put pressure on you to avoid a spectacle, haven't they threatened him with, we're going to tar you with the Madeleine McCann brush because that's an option open to us. And so you can either avoid that. It's almost like the Chris Watts guidebook to prosecution. You try to intimidate the person that you are trying to prosecute into taking kind of a plea deal and not sort of bearing the brunt of the sort of withering attention, basically bearing the brunt of a media shitstorm, and one that you'll likely never recover from, kind of thing. And I think he just said, well, look, I didn't do it and I'm not taking any deal. And anyway, the British media have kind of taken it on ever since. Doesn't it feel like that's what the strategy? If that is the strategy, you've kind of got to ask, you've got to start the conversation. How ethical are the authorities to do that sort of thing? Is that ethical? Is that moral? Is that fair? In other words, it's kind of using social pressure and social prejudice to artificially try and leverage justice. And I suppose you could say, you know what, this guy's not innocent, and we've got to play dirty to fight dirty. I suppose you could make that argument. But think about, and I know it's kind of a silly comparison, think about Batman. If Batman is basically saying, well, I'm fighting murderers and thieves, so I'm going to fight fire with fire. I'm going to murder murderers and I'm going to steal from thieves or whatever. How does that make Batman any better than the criminals? In other words, the crime fighter becomes the criminal. And I think you've kind of got to think about that in terms of true crime. How many true crime channels are honest, or to some extent self-deprecating, in the sense of deferring to morality, deferring to ethics, right? I really think it's something worth thinking about. Christina says, I'm so grateful to have your interpretations. Okay, so I know. I just find the coverage of Christian Bruckner by the British media very objectionable. I feel like the British media are kind of shallow and superficial in many respects. I've just watched the way they covered Jay Slater, and I found it very biased and very unbalanced, and it's quite surprising to me. Just on paper, I find the American media not perfect, but more sensible than the British media, and I'm quite surprised to actually be saying that. Bob says, I recently saw a documentary where the parents went to a site. Okay. So the question really that I'm raising here, let's just go back to that thing, is just would he really have committed a crime 1 month later if he was the criminal associated with Madeleine McCann? Okay, right. The last thing I want to say about this before we go on to Lucy Letby is have you guys been following my coverage of, or just any of the coverage of the Bayesian yacht? Now, what I find interesting is the way the British media undermined the Spanish. We need to bring in British investigators. We need to bring in, we can't trust the local searchers. The people are lazy, whatever. You had a lot of those same conversations going on here in Praia de Luz, same thing. In terms of the Bayesian yacht, do you hear anyone talking about we can't trust the Italian authorities? We need to bring in because it's a British billionaire that died. We need to kind of get rid of the divers and everyone, and we need to bring in British people because they understand missing person searches and all of that nonsense. You didn't really have any of that, right? Just because in a way and I'm saying this kind of in a broad way, the people involved in a search for a craft that is turned over tend to be, you would expect, just kind of matter of fact people dealing with the situation. Also, I don't think there was enough time for the whole conspiracy thing to gain legs, although it definitely did gain legs in certain areas. I'm just saying, are you going to take every single case where it happens in another country and say, we need British experts there, in order to deal with this? But you had the same thing with Amanda Knox in Italy saying, no, none of this is valid because it happened in Italy and the Italian justice system is nothing compared to the stellar American justice system, etc., etc., etc. And again, it's taking people's ordinary biases and prejudices and then using the media to actually put pressure on authorities to the extent that it actually it actually makes a court case political. It literally does make a court case political. So again, just this thing that I brought up earlier, think about how just by the nature of a case becoming high profile, does that actually jeopardize the pursuit of justice? And I think each of us, and when I say that, I mean me but other true crime creators, but also you and other people in the true crime community need to kind of think, what are our responsibilities as people, as the sort of spectators? What are our responsibilities to justice? In other words, can we sit on the sidelines and speculate and take out our boxes of popcorn and roll our eyes and have fun and all that? Can we sort of sit on the sidelines and just sort of almost like sadistically enjoy the whole circus at the cost of the circus itself. Now the whole justice system must turn itself inside out to find somewhere where the creep of social media is just somehow less. And I couldn't help thinking there's not enough sort of leadership and not enough sort of discipline, especially in terms of true crime creators, where they can respect what is going on. There's just too much of an incentive to profit from sensationalizing and distorting and going into whatever the popular narrative is. There's very little. Let's try and be balanced. Let's take the innocent until proven guilty thing. It's really now just what is the popular thing? What is going to make me the most money? What is the best side of this of the line to be on for me, kind of thing, right? And that tends to be bad for the trial, But the onus isn't, I think, only on the creators. I mean, that's bad enough. I think the onus is also on you guys to say this isn't ethical reporting. This is actually something that can distort the actual thing that aren't we all here because we care about justice and we are appalled by injustice, only to participate and fuck up the attempt to prosecute a case. It's almost like if everyone just left through the back door and don't let the door hit you on the way out, well, then the case would probably be handled properly. It's like right. And so if it's having such a profound effect, shouldn't there be more of a responsibility on us, the creators? Yes, but also on you guys to hold the creators responsible and say that's not that's not really fair, right? And I mean, social media has now become such a shitstorm that we're not even close to that point. But we're only going to get to that point if people like you go, we've been here before, and look at what happened in the Karen Reid trial, and look at what happened with Alec Baldwin, and look at what happened over there, happening over and over and over again. At what point you say, this isn't actually helping justice, and I want to help justice. You know what I'm saying? So let's move on to Lucy Letby. So as some of you know, I've covered Lucy Letby, did quite a lot of videos on that particular case. I think she's supposed to be somewhere in the range of the third worst female serial killer, but basically she's on the podium of worst serial killers in British history in terms of females, right? She was a nurse, and we are now at the point where I think she was ultimately convicted of murdering, I think, 7 babies, 7 infants. And now the tide is sort of turning to some extent, and now they're saying she's innocent, right? And people are getting quite excited about that. What I can see kind of from a mile away is the whole vibe with Lucy Letby is there's in any way a hunger, an appetite to blame the health system in Britain, right? There are a lot of kind of disenfranchised people that are just unhappy with the British government in different respects. There are groups of people that just don't like the British police. There are groups of people that don't like basically just institutions. We don't like this, we don't like that, and whatever. And so there's quite a substantial group of people who just don't like the British kind of health system. It's expensive and this and that. And so it's kind of a way of, by making Lucy Letby innocent, well, it's the hospital that's to blame. It's this health system that's to blame. So in other words, you kind of score a political point by being on the side of that, if that makes sense, right? In other words, you're not so much, it's not so much a situation of, I think Lucy is innocent, but I disapprove of the British healthcare system, and so let's blame hospitals. Let's get them to change. It's kind of weaponizing it in that respect, right? Does that make sense, what I'm saying? Yeah, no, that's a good point. It's a good point. So I can see how something that shouldn't really get anywhere, if this is not a high-profile case, I can see how a lot of people are going to get on the bandwagon and say, she's innocent because who's guilty. These hospitals, they aren't taking care of us, and this and that and the next thing. So there's a tremendous appetite to kind of blame the institution, and that's going to be, I think, quite good for Lucy Letby. Okay, so let me just bring this up. Let's look at an actual article. So there's a inquiry going on right now. Can you guys see that? Not now. Lucy Letby live, killer nicknamed Nurse Death. So her fellow colleagues, the people around her, I'm not sure if it was other nurses, but doctors around her had a nickname for her, Nurse Death. And even within that context, there's this thing of, well, it's the hospital's fault that they didn't call police, right? So right now there's a public inquiry going on into how Lucy Letby was able to murder babies at a neonatal unit over a 2-year period. Now, one thing that I think one's got to acknowledge is the way that there are actually a high proportion of female serial killers that are actually healthcare workers that are nurses. It's actually quite scary. Yeah, it definitely is something to think about. And because of levels of trust and because of levels of access, they have a lot of opportunity to commit crimes, and no one is any the wiser. Now, what made Lucy Letby's crime so hard to detect is in a hospital situation, if you injected a little bit of air into a baby's stomach or intravenous lines, just like that, just like an air bubble, that alone could give a infant a heart attack or an embolism or something like that. And it's very hard to detect, and it's also very hard to tell the difference between that happening naturally in some way and it being deliberate. And basically, the way that they caught Lucy, or the way that they prosecuted her, or the way that they made their case against her, was they basically used statistics, and they basically looked at every single time she was on duty. Well, it's a bit of a simplification to say that every single time she was on duty, somebody died. But I think there were deaths that had nothing to do with her when she wasn't on duty, let's say 50%. But then there was a large amount where if she was on duty, somebody died, like within quite a short period of time. And there wasn't anyone else that had that record. So you might have 50% kind of random deaths in a way, but then the other 50% were very highly correlated to her. And I mean, correlation isn't always causation. I'm just trying to think what the other aspect was. She was apparently in love with one of the doctors, and then he would come running to deal with the emergency situation and comfort her. I think he was a married doctor, and then he would sort of take her home. So that was another aspect. Was that other doctor on duty at the same time as well? Okay, so let's just have a look at some of what is said here. Lucy Letby was nicknamed Nurse Death by junior doctors after she was removed from duties. But despite staff concerns, hospital bosses still did not act to contact police on the matter. She was sentenced to 15 whole life orders after she was convicted of murdering 7 babies and attempting to murder 7 others on the ward in 2015 and 2016. Okay, I've just remembered what I'm meant to say. So, on the one hand, you might say, okay, but there were 50% of these deaths weren't related to her because she wasn't even in the hospital, so she had an alibi. So how can you be so sure? And I think they also use statistics to show that there was a kind of a average infant mortality. There was like an average that I don't know what it was anymore, but let's say there was a attrition rate. Just sounds so inhuman to say that, but basically there was a natural death rate in the ward of, let's say, I don't know what it was, but let's just say for sake of argument, 2 infants a month. And when she was on duty, it would go up to 4 or something like that, right? So in other words, there was a clear statistical anomaly in that respect as well. That makes sense. Let's have a look at what you guys are saying. Someone says someone saw her red-handed fiddling with intravenous. Deborah says, thanks for putting this video together. Okay, thank you. Cyberpunk says the theory is she was extremely lonely and romantically awkward and developed an attachment. That is the theory. So in other words, she was killing these babies to get the attention of a doctor that she was in love with. Right? That's correct. That's correct. Okay, so let's go on. In September 2016, 2 months after Letby was switched to clerical work, the Royal College of Pediatrics was invited to carry out a review at the hospital. The former medical director recorded him highlighting Letby. The notes read out at today's inquiry recorded Mr. Harvey saying, had to intervene with the neonatal lead as junior doctors had been referring to her as Nurse Death. Ripples to the team, can't see how to conclude without calling the police. The trust did not formally contact police until May 2017. Now, what I find a little strange is, at least they did put her on, they kind of shifted her out of the neonatal unit and they were trying to figure out what was going on. So in other words, the hospital were doing, in a sense, their own investigation, right? And I don't know, I kind of understand that. It's sort of, it's not absolutely clear. A thing like this is also unprecedented, so you wouldn't immediately think there's a serial killer in our midst. And you're trying to figure out what's going on. You've already moved her out of, I don't want to say, she's not out of harm's way, out of the working situation where she could cause harm, right? And so they did do that. The other side, which I think is fair, is if the hospital call the police, there's going to be a kind of a backlash, but also a kind of a thing of, I'm not going to bring my child to this hospital because it's not safe. And I think anyone is going to be a little concerned about that. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying one can understand there being a kind of reluctance to do that because the whole hospital can lose its reputation, right? So that's kind of what is going on here. So anyway, let's continue. So he says, so basically what they're saying is, why wasn't this acted on earlier? In July 2016, a decision was taken to downgrade the Countess of Chester's neonatal unit over an increase in deaths. Mr. Nicholas Delapour said it did not include suspicions of deliberate harm by Letby that had been raised with the Nursing and Midwifery Council and a legal team. Look at this. Staff were pointing fingers at each other. Ms. Appleton Keynes disclosed to Mr. Pace the increased neonatal death rate and the fact staff were pointing fingers at each other. Now, obviously, with the benefit of hindsight, you can look at this and say, okay, let's look at the stats. Let's check all of this information, and we can see a pattern, and the pattern involves Lucy Letby. But that's very easy to do in hindsight when you've got all the information, when it's kind of a fait accompli, right? It's a little bit different when one baby dies, and then another baby dies, and then another baby dies, and then someone kind of starts thinking, well, Lucy's being a bit strange here, and then another baby dies, and then it becomes a bit more obvious. Maybe Lucy's got something to do with it. But then nothing happens, because, wow, or have these babies been murdered and then another baby dies, kind of thing. I'm just saying, it's easy to be a Monday morning quarterback in a case like this. When it's actually happening in real time, you tend to think, well, most people tend to not think, well, the first thing, that there's a female serial killer in our midst, right? Okay, so let's just deal with this and then we'll move on. See, we're already at 52 minutes. Troubling over lack of escalation of matter to external agencies. All too often that a high threshold was needed to exist for raising concerns on potential harm to babies. So really what they're trying to do here is prevent the same thing from happening in future. So when something happens, there needs to be kind of an alert system sooner rather than later, because lives are on the line, right? Let me just read this. Working together provided that any allegation that a person working with a child has behaved in a way that has harmed a child, may have harmed a child, or that they possibly committed a criminal offense should be reported immediately to a senior management that was not complied with. Okay, so anyway, you've got this whole review of the thing taking place right now. I'm trying to decide whether I want to cover it. Look at that. Parents of babies who were attacked by Letby were not contacted by the hospital in advance of a Royal College of Pediatrics and Child Health report. Parents struggled to arrange meetings to talk to Mr. Harvey and were never told by the trust the concerns had been raised about the potential involvement of a particular nurse. So anyway, that's Lucy Letby. We're going to go on from that to Barry Morphew. But before we do, I just want to look at this article. In terms of those people who say she's innocent, she actually said in one of her post-it notes, I am evil, I did this, which the court took to be a confession. It certainly does seem like a confession, doesn't it? Those are some of those post-its that she wrote. Can you guys see that? I'm not good enough. I can't breathe. That I feel very alone and scared. I did this. Right? Can you see there? I did this. Let me just make it full screen. I did this. I killed them on purpose because I'm not good enough. I'm evil, I did this, right? I don't know, it's kind of hard to look at that and go, no, I don't think she did this. I think it's the hospital. Now, I think you've got a screw loose if you can look at this and say, no, this is irrelevant. Or maybe you say, yeah, she was just scribbling notes. It doesn't really mean anything. Well, it should, right? If you guys want to read this, I'll put it in chat. So what do you guys say? Shall we move on to Barry Morphew? Again, just a reminder what we're talking about. It's to what extent do high-profile trials or high-profile cases, to what extent are they at an immediate disadvantage because they're high-profile? You know, to what extent does the media and social media fuck up the attempt to prosecute suspects, right? Well, how about, is this another example of that? Like, is this case that you see on screen now, is that another example of that? Yes or no? What do you think? Is the Barry Morphew case another example of a high-profile case that was fucked up by virtue of it being high-profile? What do you guys think? What's your thoughts on that? Is there anyone who thinks that got nothing to do with it being high-profile? Because let's just assess where we are with the Barry Morphew case. Suzanne Morphew's remains have been found. They've tested her bones and found a formula in her bones that match a tranquilizer chemical kind of combination. And Barry Morphew, her husband, was a hunter who had tranquilizer formula and darts at home, and also they found a tranquilizer dart cap in the laundry, right? In the what do you call it? We call it the tumble dryer. Basically, the thing that dries out the clothing. What do you guys call it? And so, but the bottom line is that no one has been charged for Suzanne's murder. And how many years have gone by at this point? You know, she was obviously murdered. How many years are going to go by before there's actually a trial? The dryer, that's what I'm looking for. So they actually found a tranquilizer dart cap in the dryer. And so you might say, no, that's totally irrelevant. Well, when they found her bones and they tested her bones, they found a chemical concoction, I think it's BAM, which is 3 different chemicals that are used to tranquilize animals. That's a pretty huge clue, I think. So let's have a look at the news here. Right, can you guys see that? Let's do that. Linda Stanley, lead prosecutor in the Barry Morphew case, disbarred. So, you know, if you're going to say, you know, it doesn't matter if it's high profile, it can make or break the careers of the winners and the losers. Think about the O.J. Simpson trial and what happened to the winners in that case and what happened to the losers. Think about, I just can't think of his name. I've got his book in another room. Anyway, let me. Yeah, skip ad, okay.
The Republican district attorney who let a high-profile murder case unravel and then investigated the judge is now being disbarred. Linda Stanley will no longer be able to serve as DA for Chaffee, Fremont, Custer, and Park counties.
9 News reporter Janelle Finch joins us now. And Janelle, Stanley went from the center of a major case to losing her law license.
That's right. Linda Stanley botched the murder case against Barry Morphew, then targeted the judge in the case. Morphew was accused of killing his missing wife, Suzanne, in 2020. The 83-page decision from a panel under the Colorado Supreme Court included several complaints for how Stanley handled herself in and out of the courtroom.
My name is Linda Stanley.
Linda Stanley is marking the end of her time as a district attorney with the potential end of her career.
It's certainly a fall from grace.
Fall from grace. Yeah. So do you guys remember this guy? Can you guys see this? Mark Furman. Wasn't he the detective in the O.J. Simpson trial? And the back of this book, so it's called The Murder Business, Mark Furman. The back of this book, it says, if people know how it's done, how the media seduce, buy, bribe, and corrupt like an inevitable malignant cancer on a murder investigation, they might be too sickened to buy the next ticket to the carnival. The unfortunate truth is that today, each murder has many victims, and high-profile murder can hurt innocent people who get burned by the spotlight, whether or not they sort it out by themselves. I learned that firsthand as a police witness in the O.J. Simpson trial, a wrenching experience that showed how the criminal justice system can be manipulated by money, power, politics, and fame. Exactly that is happening in true crime right now. He says, in 20 years of police work, I thought that the guilt or innocence of the suspect was all important. Then I started covering high-profile murder cases where ratings and profit often far outweigh the importance of facts. The media make their own rules and even then break them or find ways to work loopholes into them. All that matters is ratings. And I mean, what he's talking about here is the mainstream media, but it applies absolutely to the social media. If anything, social media has taken its cue from the mainstream media. So I see there are people who are criticizing Mark Furman. I think you're kind of making my point, which is that instead of it being about the trial of O.J. Simpson, it becomes the trial of the police officer. And that seems to be what a lot of people remember. That, you know, if you think about Madeleine McCann, becomes the trial of Detective Amaral. No. It's what happened to Madeleine McCann. In this whole thing with Barry Morphew, is it the murder of Suzanne Morphew? No, it's the district attorney on trial. You know, when it's Alec Baldwin, you know, are we dealing with the death of Helena Hutchins? No, we're dealing with the prosecutor who behaved improperly. It's like, huh? This isn't how it's supposed to be. We should be in court dealing with the issues and not dealing with something else. Not trying to find some way through the back door of having the case not actually heard in trial. It should be when someone kills somebody else, the priority should be let's find justice for that person, not let's find ways of criticizing and undermining the person who's trying to get justice, right? And we've just seen that with Karen Reed, and people might say, yeah, but you don't understand just how corrupt these police officers are. Okay, but there is a person who's dead. John O'Keefe, he's dead. So can we start there and then we can deal with all the other stuff later? Or should we just use the Karen Reed trial to satisfy our feelings of whatever we feel against the police in general? Same with Lucy Letby. 7 babies are dead. Okay, there are maybe issues with hospitals. Can we put that aside and kind of first deal with the specifics that we're trying to deal with, and not use these trials to score points against institutions? Let's not use these trials to satisfy our own feelings of bias and whatever political agenda. Let's deal with somebody died. Can we prosecute the person who died and not spread it into bias and prejudice? Can we like stick to the brief here, kind of thing, right? Do you follow what I'm trying to say? And it just seems like people have become so easy to manipulate. I don't know. It's really, really crazy. Anyway, let's hear what he says.
News legal expert Scott Robinson says Stanley can't be jailed for unethical behavior, but disbarment is nearly as severe. The state's complaints accuses Stanley of misconduct while handling the murder case against Barry Morphew.
If District Attorney Lynn.
So make no mistake, Stanley's misconduct, the issues that are going on here are all related to Barry Morphew. It's not like she did something somewhere else and something somewhere else and something somewhere else. It's related to a high-profile trial, right? And it's also related to a true crime YouTuber that she spoke to. And that's why I asked in the poll, is this all her fault? Or is it also the fault of a true crime YouTuber who's like, come on to my show. Let's talk about what's going on. And it's like, do you not know that that's not ethical yourself? Are you not aware of that? And so he gets wonderful popularity, and he gets so many tens of thousands of views, and he gets his pound of flesh. And guess what happens? The Barry Morphew trial, that's ostensibly all about what we are all here to get justice for Suzanne Morphew. Isn't that why we're all here? Well, that actual thing is totally fucked up. But isn't that supposed to matter? So I just kind of can't help wondering, was there anyone who was watching that going, should you be doing this? Should you be saying this? Or was everyone putting out their boxes of popcorn and enjoying the circus, but at the expense of justice? Because I'm serious, if you were having an interview going on that particular channel, and one person said, hey, I don't know whether this we should be doing this, the case could have been prosecuted if enough people just kind of thought critically about what was going on and said, we shouldn't really be doing this.
Stanley had only violated discovery rules and withheld exculpatory evidence, I don't think she would have been recommended for disbarment.
The state says Stanley made inappropriate comments about the case to the media and launched a secret investigation into the presiding judge in retaliation for his rulings.
We want to make sure that the people who are representing the state of Colorado in criminal cases are acting ethically. And the vast majority of prosecutors do just that. And that's why it was really troublesome to learn about what Linda Stanley was accused of.
The Colorado Supreme Court will make the ruling on Stanley's future.
They are the final say.
Attorney Iris Edon, who represented Morphew, hopes the disbarment sticks. In a statement to 9 News, she writes, "This was absolutely the right outcome. Linda Stanley will no longer be permitted to wield significant power as a prosecutor." Edon says this only came about after Stanley harmed many people and caused great damage.
The Colorado District Attorney's Council's.
So I think before I say what I think, let's just have a look at the poll. Let's just see what you guys have voted on here. Let's have a quick look. Please vote if you haven't voted. Let's have a look. It's the DA's fault, 22%. Do true crime creators know the law? 22% as well. It's overkill, 31%. And then 25% say I agree with what happened. Now, I must say when the poll was in its infancy, its overkill was only at 12%. I'm pleased to see it's at 31%. I agree with the majority of you who say it's overkill. I really don't think the prosecutor should have been disbarred over this. That does, to me, feel like overkill. You could simply shift the case to somebody else, as far as I'm concerned. But the other side to it, which to me just seems like much ado about nothing, is her term comes to an end this year. So, I mean, if she's disbarred basically now, September, she basically just loses 3 months of her term. And what was she going to do after that? I wouldn't be surprised if she was going to retire pretty much soon after that. You've also heard someone saying that the standards in Colorado are really high. I don't think they are very high personally when it comes to high-profile cases. I kind of called it in terms of the Chris Watts case, I called it a long time before it actually happened, where I said, I actually don't think this case is going to trial. I just got a funny feeling this case is not going to trial. And the reason I felt that was I thought it's not going to be good politically for the whole oil industry, the whole fracking thing, which was very much a political hot potato at the time. And guess what? The case never went to trial. It was very odd the way it was handled. Then there's also the JonBenet Ramsey mess. Also very high profile, also total. You kind of got the sense that the district attorney just had total disregard for what the public and certainly what the media thought. That's the impression one has. And then there are other cases like Patrick Frazee, where they didn't allow cameras at all in the courtroom. At the time, I didn't really agree with it, but I must say I tend to agree with it now. My own personal position is that one should treat, especially social media, as like poison. It's like poison to the pursuit of justice. And you need to kind of completely control it, and if possible, discourage it as far as possible. And to some extent the media as well. I sort of feel like the media are a lot more responsible than social media, but that's certainly not true of all media.
Says Stanley is still the acting DA, as the disbarment won't take effect for another 35 days. During this time, she can still appeal the decision.
So she may be disbarred as late as the end of September, and her term would have come to an end anyway, I think, this year. So it's not a big deal as far as I'm concerned. So I just want to quote from one particular article, if it's going to let me. I think I am a paying subscriber. I've got so many. I pay for so many subscriptions to news sources. I can't really tell which ones I have and which ones I don't anymore. So this is from the Denver Post. Linda Stanley to be disbarred, and I wanna deal with the commentary right at the end of this. That is that are the words of Iris Ayton, Barry Morphew's attorney. And I must say it's pretty incredible that she has succeeded in basically getting like kind of smudging out her opponent, like completely, getting her to lose her job, right? Look at this though. And of course, Iris Ayton's a former prosecutor herself, if I remember correctly. So look at this. Stanley will become the first sitting district attorney to be involuntarily disbarred. in recent memory. So there was a panel, 3 members dissented. Just trying to look at. So there you have it. Much of the disciplinary hearing centered on Stanley's handling of the high-profile case against Barry Morphew, who was charged with murder in 2021. The murder only happened in 2020, so we already like 4 years, we're heading to 5 years after Suzanne's murder, with not a prosecution in sight. It's pretty disgusting. I'm not going to read the name of this YouTuber, but it says here, state regulators were accused Stanley of making inappropriate comments to members of the media and on a YouTube crime show. She even posted extensive comments on the YouTube video using her own name and a photo of herself. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. And then she apparently said that she told this YouTuber that she believed that Morphew strangled his wife and it wouldn't have been in the family's hot tub because that didn't seem to be used. And then we know it wasn't bloody. She texted in 2021. Now, if you think about it, if this is what basically screwed up the whole case, well, it's in the public domain right now. That's why I say I think it's overkill, right? I mean, we're reading about the things that she said that she wasn't supposed to say. And I mean, is it really such a big deal that, you say it and suddenly it's like, oh, we can't, how do they say it? The cat's out of the bag kind of thing. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. Is that what we're dealing with here? I mean, this isn't like a major disclosure. It's, I don't know. I'm certainly not defending it. I'm just saying, really? So you throw out the prosecutor and you throw out the whole case on the basis of this? Really? Okay, so I want to just read what Iris Ayton says here. On Tuesday, she said, unethical prosecutors are a persistent epidemic across Colorado and the United States. Wow, so she makes it sound like there's this whole tsunami of corruption going on, right? What I find corrupt here is that a woman was murdered going on 5 years ago and nothing's happening. I find that corrupt. I don't find it. I find so if you say this prosecutor is unethical, or this prosecutor did this, or this prosecutor did that, yeah, let's talk about that. But let's get the important stuff done. If you have a justice system, your job is to prosecute, is to get justice. I don't think the job of the justice system is to go after other people in the justice system. That to me is not what it's all about. The job of justice is to satisfy the justice needs of a community, of the community that it serves. Justice is supposed to serve the community, not serve itself, not score points against itself, right? So when she talks about how unethical everything is, I think it's pretty unethical what's happened in the Barry Morphew case. I find that unethical. I find that, same with Alec Baldwin. I find that unethical. Am I wrong? Maybe I am wrong. Maybe you could say, yeah, but you don't know the law that well. Okay, but I do know that somebody dies and then they try to prosecute and then that didn't happen. And you're saying that's ethical. That's the right conclusion here. Doesn't feel right to me. Really doesn't feel right to me. So she goes on to say, fortunately, in this case, the right thing happened. And let's just have a look at the poll. 24% say, I agree with what happened. So a quarter of you have the same position of the defense attorney. Fortunately, the right thing happened here. I don't think there's very much that is fortunate in this case. This unethical prosecutor can no longer harm and abuse her power, and it ensures the public will be safe.
Live in the moment, not in the worry. With comprehensive cover for true peace of mind. Sometimes this is freedom.
YouTuber and left a comment and did this and that, as opposed to a murderer
The Republican district
who's
attorney
still
who
out
let a
there
high-profile
5
murder
years
case
after the
unraveled
fact.
and then investigated the judge,
And the
is now
public's
being
going to be
disbarred.
safe.
Linda Stanley will no longer be able to serve as DA.
This
for
is
Chaffee,
absolutely
Fremont,
the right
Custer, and Park
outcome, and I
counties.
could say
9 News
this is a
reporter Janelle
completely
Finch joins us
appropriate
now. Janelle
outcome for this
Stanley
kind
went
of
from the
breach of the
center of a
public
major
trust.
case to losing her law license.
That's right. Linda Stanley botched the murder case against Barry Morphew, then targeted
And
the judge in the case.
she saves the
Morphew was
best
accused of
whopper
killing his missing
for
wife Suzanne in
last.
2020.
She says,
The 83-page decision from
it's
a
time
panel
to
on
let
the
go of the
Colorado Supreme Court
Morphew
included
prosecution.
several complaints
Oh,
for how
okay.
Stanley handled herself
So let
in
me get this
and out of the
straight.
courtroom.
What we need to do
Linda
is
Stanley is
nothing.
marking the end of her time as a
Suzanne
district
Morphew was
attorney,
murdered,
the
and what we
potential
need
end
to
of
do
her
is
career.
It's certainly a fall from
move on.
grace.
9 News legal
And that
expert
would
Scott
be, is that,
Robinson says
am
Stanley
I
can't be
understanding that
jailed for
correctly?
unethical
Is that
behavior,
justice?
but
Just
disbarment
let go
is
of it,
nearly
move
as
on,
severe.
and
The state's complaints
okay.
accuses
Is that what
Stanley
we're
of
supposed to do
misconduct
here?
while handling the murder
And
case
what
against
did she
Barry
say
Morphew.
here?
If District Attorney Linda Stanley
this is
had
completely
only
appropriate. It's a
violated
completely appropriate
discovery
outcome. Okay,
rules and withheld
absolutely right. The right thing. Okay.
exculpatory evidence, I don't think she
What's
would have been
unethical is the
recommended for
prosecutor
disbarment.
here.
The
It's not
state says
unethical
Stanley made
to
inappropriate comments about the
let
case
go
to
of
the
the
media
Morphew prosecution.
and launched a secret
I must say,
investigation
if I
into the
was Suzanne
presiding judge
Morphew,
in
I think that's
retaliation for
pretty
his rulings.
unethical.
We want
It's
to make
like,
sure that the
well,
people
I was
who are representing the
murdered,
state
and that was
of
5 years
Colorado
ago,
in criminal cases are
and
acting
nothing's
ethically.
happening, and
And
that's
the
okay.
vast
Okay.
majority of prosecutors do just
And
that.
look at what she says
That's
here.
why
Can I
it
make
was
this a bit
really
bigger?
troublesome to learn about what Linda Stanley
Any
was
prosecution
accused
of
The
Mr.
Colorado
Morphew
Supreme
would
Court
be an
will make the
extension
ruling on
of this
Stanley's
unethical
future.
They
behavior.
are the
Oh,
final say.
so
Attorney
if you
Iris Edon,
prosecute
who represented
Barry
Morphew,
Morphew,
hopes the
that's
disbarment sticks.
unethical.
In a statement to 9 News, she writes, "This was absolutely the right outcome. Linda Stanley will no longer be
Is there a video
permitted to use
playing over
wield
me?
significant power as a prosecutor." Edon says this only came
Oh,
about
definitely not
after
my
Stanley
day.
harmed many people and caused great damage.
The Colorado District Attorney's Council says Stanley is still the acting DA as the disbarment won't take effect for another 35 days.
Okay, so let me just close that. Wow, this has not been my best live stream, that's for sure. It's really why I don't like doing lives. Okay, and then she says, how can we condemn Mr. Morphew after the lengths that this prosecutor's office and Ms. Stanley went to obliterate the presumption of innocence in the eyes of the public and in the United States? How can we condemn Mr. Morphew? How can we do that when the real crime here is the prosecutor's office? And so Barry Morphew should be presumed innocent. Okay. Well, so far, Barry Morphew looks like he's winning that presumption of innocence, doesn't it? I wonder how long that's going to continue. Okay, so that is the Morphew case. Doesn't it get your blood up? Doesn't it make you don't you find this like really upsetting? I mean, this is a really good example of a high-profile case that you wouldn't have a YouTuber involved in this. You wouldn't have the DA talking to the YouTuber. You wouldn't have her disbarred if it wasn't high profile. It would have been sorted out probably 3 years ago in 2021. That's well put, Ender. Well put. Okay. So we've done Bryan Kohberger, Barry Morphew, Lucy Letby, Madeleine McCann. Shall we do Alec Baldwin next? I must say, I feel there's quite a lot in common between Barry Morphew and Alec Baldwin, right? The same kind of thing. Let's go after the prosecutor. right? It's almost like let's kill the messenger. Let's forget what we really had to do and deal with the sideshow of it, the sideshow aspect. Okay. So Alec Baldwin, do you guys know what the latest news is with him? Look at this headline. Thanks a lot, Sue. Any updates on Rex Heuermann? I'm not sure. Yeah, but the thing about the 2 additional women is kind of old news. I have dealt with it. Okay, so let's have a look at this. Evidence? Who needs evidence? Alec Baldwin's Rust manslaughter case won't be resurrected because prosecutor exceeded a page limit. That to me is also like overkill. It's like somebody died here, but what really bothers me is that this was too many pages. So let's not retry the case. And what I want to highlight here is where he says, so there you have it, 42 pages too long. What I want to highlight here is clearly intent on rubbing some salt in the wound she just gave Morrissey. That's the prosecutor. Judge Sommer also made a point of referencing another case on the same procedural issue. A winning argument can fit within the limitation of the rule. So this is really about the length of the motion that she gave. I think it's supposed to be 10 pages and it was 52 pages. And so I think it was denied on the basis of how long it was. Thanks a lot, Earth. On the one hand, I appreciate the coverage from Dominic Patton from Deadline. On the other hand, I sort of feel like it's a little bit misinformed in terms of knowledge of the law and that sort of thing, which is why I want to deal with this one from Cake, or K-A-K-E. So, you kind of get the sense, you kind of have the impression from this that the case is lost, that the case has been dismissed, that it's all over. But it's not all over. All the prosecutor needs to do is redo the lengthy motion, resubmit it, but this time within 10 pages, and then it can be kind of examined, right? So there you have it. Prosecutors must resubmit a motion because the initial filing was too long. So there you have it. The prosecutor filed a 52-page motion exceeding the 10-page limit for motions. So a hearing on this motion is set for September the 26th. So mark that date on your calendar. It's about 2 weeks from now. Meanwhile, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed is serving an 18-month prison sentence. That sentence and that conviction is to some extent contingent on what is decided here. If the judge decides to uphold her dismissal, well, then Gutierrez-Reed has certainly has a chance of being acquitted, and she could probably sue for wrongful imprisonment, which I will find very interesting. I just want to have a look at what notes I wrote down here. Where's that? Yeah, so I just want to highlight this. And you guys see that given the procedural posture of the case, the court must enforce the local rule to regulate the court's docket and promote judicial efficiency. So in the name of judicial efficiency, she's saying she's delaying the whole thing. What I would consider judicial efficiency is just read the damn report and rule on it. That to me would be one way of speeding up the whole process. So it's for me very ironic to say, this report that you've written, I'm not going to look at it, go back and do it all over again, and I'm doing this out of judicial efficiency, because I can't help feeling the whole thing in terms of the prosecution of Alec Baldwin is the opposite of judicial efficiency. It is frustrating that effort. It is fucking up that effort. But anyway, those are the words of it. Anyway, my takeout from this is that it's possible that that ship hasn't sailed and that we may yet see a prosecution in this case. I think it's a long shot, but I'm just saying it's not absolutely over. We will know for sure. We may know for sure on September 26th. So that's sort of kind of good news. Okay, and that then leaves us with JonBenet Ramsey. That's the very last thing we're going to deal with here. Very last case. I meant to cover, or I meant for the last video that was posted to include some of these images. Let me just show you. So that is the phone in the kitchen. I think it needs to be juxtaposed with the phone in the basement. And there it is. There's the phone in the basement. You don't often see that. What's the difference? Well, the one is wall mounted, the other one is on a table. And that phone you could probably cradle or miscradle. That phone, very unlikely that you would do that. Then what I want to just bring to your attention is, how do we know about the, well, let me, before I show that to you guys, how do we know about the high-tech print? Well, let me ask the question another way. There's been a lot of, in terms of whether Burke Ramsey had high-tech shoes or boots, there's been a lot of kind of confusion around that. He did, he didn't. What settles that matter basically once and for all? Does anyone know? Does anyone know what the source is for that information? Anyone here that knows that off the top of your head? Like, how do we know that Burke Ramsey did own high-tech shoes? Anyone know? Well, here's the answer. I will state this as a fact. There are two people who have provided us with information, including your son, including Burke himself, that he owned high-tech shoes prior to the murder of your daughter. And Lynn Wood says, you are stating that Burke Ramsey has told you that he owned high-tech shoes? Yes. And where did this take place? Where did this take place? Anyone know the answer? So this was just some information that I meant to be part of the last video, right? It was in the grand jury. That was what Burke also said to the grand jury, right? Okay, so what I really want to talk about here is, why wasn't the case prosecuted? The JonBenet Ramsey case, why wasn't it prosecuted? Why didn't the district attorney act on those indictments, right? Anyone got any thoughts on that? Think about it. He said there's insufficient evidence in the Ramsey case. Do you agree with that part? Do you think, you know what, maybe that's true? You know, there's the headline in real time, October 14, 1999, grand jury, insufficient evidence. Do you think that's the real reason? Oh, yeah, there just wasn't enough evidence to prosecute this. Okay, so if that's not the real reason, what was the real reason? Any thoughts? Well, have a look at this. I don't know if you guys can read that. So this was interviewed Dana Hoffman, who represented the housekeeper at a certain point. And this is what he said during a interview. I think it was with Katie Couric. I'm not 100% sure. But anyway, this is what he said. The key thing is she has always spoken out her own personal beliefs. So this is in terms of the housekeeper. It was clear to her that the statements made in Patsy's book are contrary to what she knows to be the truth. Again, talking about Linda Hoffman Pugh. And then he says this, the big issue is why the grand jury did not indict. Right? So he didn't know that they did indict. He didn't know that. But he says, why there was $2 million spent investigating this case, and yet Alex Hunter announced that there wasn't sufficient evidence. Remember, grand juries can indict a ham sandwich, and that certainly wasn't a ham sandwich grand jury. That was a very expensive dinner that was being served. And that's kind of his way of saying there was sufficient evidence. There was a lot of evidence that this case went on for 2 years and cost $2 million. Now, you're not going to spend $2 million on a case where there's no evidence, right? So again, let me ask you, why do you think the district attorney didn't indict? Any thoughts? Okay, I'm going to share with you an article from August 22nd, 1996, from the New York Times. I am subscribed to this. Let's just log in. Just give me a second. Okay, can you see that? Ex-friends of JonBenet's parents call for special prosecutor. So this was August 22nd, 1998. This was more than a year before the announcement. This was halfway through the grand jury trial, right? I'm just going to read this. 3 former friends of the Ramsey family have asked for a special prosecutor to take over the stalled 20-month-old investigation of the killing of JonBenet Ramsey. The 3 residents of Boulder have broken off their friendships with John and Patsy. In separate letters, they accused Boulder's district attorney, Alex Hunter, of dragging his feet in prosecuting the case and bending over backward to accommodate the Ramseys. So this is even before the district attorney officially announced that he wasn't going to take it further. You had ex-friends of the Ramseys expressing their concern, and they accused Alex Hunter of dragging his feet and bending over backward to accommodate the Ramseys. And if you think about it, were they right? So have a look at the justification for that. Mr. Hunter has provided evidence to Ramsey defense attorneys at their request, but denied requests by other witnesses for transcripts of their own statements to the police, wrote Fleet and Priscilla White. He has thoroughly alienated police detectives and key witnesses. He's talking about Alex Hunter has thoroughly alienated police detectives. And think about what happened at the end of this. He kind of, I don't want to say alienated everyone because people didn't know what he did, but how do you think people feel about what happened at the end of the day in hindsight? In their 15-page letter released on Wednesday to the people of Colorado, the Whites wrote that Alex Hunter has no intention of seeking indictment from a grand jury. This was a year before it was announced, right? And so again, you say, why didn't it happen? Well, look at what they say. The couple faulted the prosecutor for allowing a chummy atmosphere to build with Ramsey lawyers and asserted that prosecutors and police leaders deliberately delayed the case by killing time with well-publicized busy work and task lists. Another thing just to be aware of is in terms of the charges that were ultimately considered for John and Patsy, there's a statute of limitations. So if you push the whole trial, you push the whole verdict to 1999, well, the statute of limitations is 3 years. Well, when did the whole thing happen? December 1996. The grand jury decision, which was like a non-decision, was October 1999. Well, how much time have you got left before the statute of limitations expires, right? Yeah, they also talk about the refusal of John and Patsy to cooperate fully. You saw on Larry King, when it was brought up that they didn't cooperate, they thought that's a myth. That's not true. This is written about at the time, like this is 1998. And so you even had Judith Phillips, the Ramsey photographer, saying, also wanting a special prosecutor because Mr. Hunter was willing to obstruct the justice he swore to uphold. Now, what makes this so powerful, again, is it's written in the New York Times, published in the New York Times a year before the grand jury indictments were disregarded, right? So look at this as well. Look at this. One legal analyst found it interesting that both the Whites and Steve Thomas, the former police detective, had publicly warned that a grand jury would not indict. Now, again, think about what we're talking about here. We're talking about an article criticizing Alex Hunter prior to the grand jury announcement. This is August 22, 1998, right? And so despite this being in the public record, look at what happened anyway. I just want to go back to that. This is the second time that people have said that this grand jury is going to be a fix, said Craig Silverman. It's unusual to hear stuff like that. And so they were actually reading the tea leaves correctly, right? So look at this. Yesterday, now this is dealing with August 1998, Denver's two newspapers published articles that appear to open a window on the Ramsey household in the early morning of December 26. According to these reports, Mrs. Ramsey failed to hang up the telephone for a few moments. A California laboratory reportedly digitally enhanced snippets of conversation picked up at 5:52 a.m. from the Ramsey kitchen. I don't think that that's correct. Personally, I think that that's an error. According to the newspaper, Mrs. Ramsey can be heard screaming, and JonBenet's 10-year-old brother can be heard asking what she found. Mr. Ramsey can be heard telling his son to go back to bed. The Ramseys have said their son was asleep in bed when Mrs. Ramsey found the note and called 911. All of this from 1998. And so you have Hal Haddon breaking his silence to issue a statement denouncing these news articles. Did this turn out to be true or false? This thing about John, the 10-year-old brother being heard on the, well, apparently he told the grand jury that he thought it was his voice. So is it not true? Anyway, so he said police sources leak what they claim is critical evidence and spin it against the Ramseys. The Ramseys are helpless to reply because they do not have access to the evidence. Again, think about what I've been saying all along. Does a high-profile case tend to help justice along or not? And so look at what happened in this particular case. It's pretty astonishing, isn't it? Okay, so the last thing I want to bring to your attention is Boulder DA refused to sign indictment. Okay, so that's September 22nd. Hunter refused to sign the indictment. So look at this. This is quite interesting. What does the law say about this? University of Colorado law professor Mimi Wesson said in an email, it is her opinion that proper legal procedure would have been to sign the document. In other words, it would have been proper. It would have been typical for the district attorney to sign the document, file it with the court, and then move in open court to dismiss the charges. And look how well this is communicated. That would be the more transparent and responsible course. And the flip side of that is to say, wasn't the way that this was conducted obscure, opaque, deliberately not transparent, and certainly in terms of justice, irresponsible and cynical and manipulative and all those kinds of things? Okay. Then there's also an interesting article authored by Lawrence Schiller on this question. I mean, it's basically the bottom line here. Well, the thing that's sort of under discussion. Why JonBenet Ramsey's murder wasn't prosecuted. And you'd think that this would be a very authoritative account. I think what makes it, the perspective that one's got to bear in mind is it was published in 1998. So it was still in the process of being not prosecuted, right? It's not as though he wrote this in 1999 or 2000. And so I think one's got to at least limit your criticism of the article by saying, well, the whole shebang hadn't played out yet, certainly hadn't fully played out. This is a really good article, though. I'm going to put a link to it in chat. But I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I do just want to highlight one section of it. So he says, the DA had good reasons not to go after them in court. Now, I must say one thing that I find a little curious about this is, Lawrence Schiller appeared on Dr. Phil next to John Ramsey and next to Lynn Wood. He seemed to certainly have the ear of the district attorney. And he's written probably the most definitive book on the Ramsey case. And yet he says the DA had good reasons not to go after them. Do you guys agree with that? I mean, it's quite a statement for an author who knows the case back to front to say, you know what, he actually had good reasons not to pursue this case. So I just want to see what I can. So I'm just going to read this section. From the beginning, the public's frustration over the absence of an arrest was exacerbated by squabbling between the Boulder police and the district attorney's office, which was stuck in a morass of surly accusations, stalemates, shifting alliances, and contravening orders about the handling and sharing of evidence. The only person still firmly in place among the key people is Alex Hunter. I think that's really an interesting point, is that you saw lots of people being fired and leaving the investigation, but especially bolder cops. I think one of the first detectives that was thrown off the case was Detective Larry Mason. You almost never hear about him. And so you have all of these people leaving the case, but one person stays in charge, Alex Hunter. And ultimately, what happens? So he goes on to say he was then a 61-year-old district attorney of Boulder County. Hunter didn't agree with Ella early on that the Ramseys should be arrested. So you actually had the chief of police saying we need to arrest the Ramseys, and Hunter intervening right in the beginning. He's been much more cautious than the police in speculating about who the perpetrator is. As a consequence, he's been accused of incompetence, cowardice, and partiality towards the Ramseys' well-connected attorneys. Don't forget, the district attorney can be kind of a political figure. They need to be voted in, right? They need to be elected. And so he says, Schiller says, this disturbs him, this allegation. In all my political life, these kinds of allegations have never been raised before. There's a shadow hanging over me. People are taking shots. Hunter says adamantly that the case against the Ramseys is unfileable. So yeah, they say the majority of child homicides are committed at home by parents, relatives, or people responsible. This makes for a forensic nightmare, but even so, in the Ramsey case, the cops felt they had a slam dunk. Now, let's bear in mind the cops did make some serious mistakes. Detective Steve Thomas, who I think was a great cop and a good investigator, did fixate unhealthily on Patsy Ramsey. He felt that Patsy Ramsey was guilty. I don't, of killing JonBenet. So, that kind of thing's not going to help the prosecution, having such a sort of narrow sense of what's going on. I think Steve Thomas's opinion was basically whoever wrote the ransom note killed JonBenet. But I think there's another way of interpreting that. I'm not going to go through all of this, but this is a really interesting article and a very interesting analysis, very early in terms of the case's history. And so Schiller quotes the neighboring district attorney saying the following. Can you guys read that? According to the New Yorker, if the Ramseys are charged, the defense attorneys in place are excellent lawyers with an excellent ability to take each and every comma and turn it into a period. The Ramseys have the money to buy a defense team like that of O.J. Simpson if they need to, and Hunter's been determined from the start not to small town the case. So it's quite interesting where Hunter says, if it starts out as an accident, then becomes a cover-up, you must look at the same 800 pieces of evidence differently, an accidental killing and a premeditated cover-up. So it's quite interesting what was said really early on. Okay. You guys can read this on your own time. I'm not sure if you are subscribers to the New Yorker, but it really is worth a read. I do think that Alex Hunter was very influenced by the O.J. Simpson case, where he sort of felt like, I don't want to take this case to trial and lose. That's going to impinge on my legacy. I think he was very aware of his legacy. Have a look at this. The other frequent criticism of Hunt is that he's missed a plea bargain. So he had a reputation for not bringing cases to trial. I mean, that's still quite well known. So just a little bit in terms of the politics, Hunter shaped his office to reflect Boulder's unique circumstances. He was elected district attorney in 1972, the first time 18-year-olds voted. He advocated reclassifying marijuana possession as a misdemeanor and squeaked into office by a margin of 688 votes out of 68,000. That same year, liberals who advocated slow growth and environmental protection won a number of local races and started to form a new establishment, the People's Republic of Boulder, some called it. And they talk about him becoming just his whole rise to power. In 1963, he became a law clerk for justice. He was more conservative than most of his contemporaries. I read somewhere that Hunter would interview people who wanted to run for office and basically discourage them from doing so. And so he could then stay in his position unchallenged. If you think about that, it's brilliant in its simplicity, if you can put it off. I'm just trying to, I don't know if it was this article that dealt with that. So let's have a look at this. The Ramsey case is by any standard bizarre, and it is certainly unique as far as crimes in Colorado go. Chief Kobe now says that there is a possibility that the Ramsey case will ultimately be shelved, but he would be in favor of convening a grand jury if an indictment was not forthcoming. So ironic, isn't it? Hunter worries that he could confront a runaway grand jury. A prejudiced panel might recommend an indictment of one or both parents, whatever the evidence, and Hunter could then be faced with the dilemma of having either to refuse to sign the indictment or to try a weak case. If the grand jury failed to indict, it may, under Colorado law, issue a report that can be made public and might serve Hunter's interests. So again, all of this was under discussion as early as January 1998. This whole thing of failing to indict, will there be an indictment, right? All under discussion. Some people think that because of the way Alex Hunt has chosen to run the DA's office, it just doesn't have what it takes for no holds barred court battle. That's another opinion on why it didn't happen. There's not enough of the day in, day out courtroom experience that turns young attorneys into seasoned trial lawyers. And I can't help thinking, is it a similar situation to Judge Sommer in Santa Fe, where they haven't dealt with a big show trial like Alec Baldwin, and so she just doesn't want to deal with that. And possibly the reason is because she feels intimidated, and possibly the reason is because she doesn't have experience in that regard. Isn't that the same thing that the district attorney had? Now, I could be wrong. It could be some other way of interpreting the law or people's attitudes, but you can't help thinking Alex Hunter, there were never any cases going to trial because he was Mr. Plea Bargain. Well, he must have been frightened by the prospect of not just a case going to trial, but a case going to trial with everyone watching. And what else would be exposed, and in what other ways could he possibly be embarrassed? Once this whole thing became a legal war, and how long would that be going on for? So he says they're so rehabilitation and treatment oriented on a conscious level that when a case ends up in court, self-doubt creeps in on an unconscious level. It's not a trial-oriented system. The skills aren't there. That's not in any sense a criticism, it's just a fact. So I do think this gives some added insight into what is sort of going on behind the scenes. You never really hear these discussions when John Ramsey's at CrimeCon. You always just hear the Boulder police were inept. You never hear that the district attorney was inept or inexperienced or didn't have much skill, whatever word you want to use, in the courtroom. You never hear that discussion. It's always about the Boulder police. And I think there needs to be more discussion about the other side of the thing. I mean, what really was the death knell for the JonBenet Ramsey investigation or prosecution? It wasn't the Boulder police. That's a myth. And the media perpetuate that myth by basically repeating what they're told, unthinkingly and uncritically. Okay, I want to have a look at some of your comments. I can't believe this has gone twice as long as I scheduled. We're at the 2-hour mark, but there you have it. So have a look at some of your comments. Earth, I've always thought that some judges are got to by pressure and tactics. So you guys do know that a documentary is coming to, actually it's not a documentary, it's a limited series featuring Melissa McCarthy, Clive Owen, and they've just cast the actress who's going to play JonBenet Ramsey. That's like the latest news. So it's going to be on Paramount Plus. Let me just end on that note. Can you guys see that? JonBenet Ramsey's series at Paramount Plus finds its title character. So I guess she's going to be playing JonBenet, probably going to have her hair dyed. I think her name's Emily Mitchell. I've got no idea who these people are going to be acting as. Any thoughts? I guess someone here might be Detective Steve Thomas. I don't know. Emily Mitchell will play JonBenet. Shea Wigman and Will Patton will star as District Attorney Alex Hunter and Lou Smith. Okay. Headland will play Steve Thomas. And so the list goes on. all I can say is I think they need to be very careful. I mean, the easy way to do this is do it as apologia, do it as a defense of the Ramseys, and then they won't have any problems. But if they are too on the chin, they could face a lawsuit, which wouldn't be the first time. Okay, I think that's it from me. Ando says, I worry a fictionalized series will perpetuate the intruder narrative as if it's a fact. Yeah, definitely. Good question. M. Wynn says, so sorry that I missed this live. I will watch the replay. I don't know if you really missed much. To me, it definitely wasn't my best live, that's for sure. I actually did so much research, put everything out. I did far more prep than I normally do, and I really feel like it didn't really pan out very well. Anyway, it's just the way things go. Okay. Chelsea says, thanks for being here, everyone. Bria, thank you for being here as well. Do I have any other mods in the house at the moment? Oh, excuse me. Yeah, Chelsea and Bria, just the two of you. Okay. Okay, thanks a lot, Robbie Robin, and I'm glad you're enjoying the murder of Vincent van Gogh. Appreciate it. I actually had a conversation with somebody else about it. Saw that I had one book sale on that. I thought she'd bought it, but it ended up being you. So that mystery's been solved. Thanks, Rookie. Okay. Just a quick thank you to those who gave super chats: Robbie Robin, Deborah, and Al-Su Sabo, and Earth as well. Thank you to all of you. I'm probably going to do a video on the Madeleine McCann case. I haven't done that for quite a while. On I don't think I'm going to tell you what it's about. I'm not going to spoil it, but it's on a subject that you don't hear about very often, and you may not have heard about ever. Some of you have read my books, you may have come across it, but if you haven't read my books on Madeleine McCann, I don't think you would have come across it really anywhere else. And I think it is a really interesting thing to. It's a very interesting kind of thought experiment. And I have to say, before I even do the video, I'm not 100% sure what the answer is. So I'm going to be asking a question, dealing with some of what we know, dealing with some of the context, but I've got to acknowledge I don't really know what the answer is. I have an idea, but it definitely is an interesting question. So that should be coming up in the next day or so. Also, what's on the agenda, I want to do another video on Colt Gray. The number 2 clue we all missed. Here's a bit of a spoiler. It looks like one of the biggest bullies in his life was his own father. His own father was calling him a sissy and basically felt that his own father was like emasculating him. So, he was getting some of the worst criticism at home, which is probably why it felt so intolerable at school. Does that make sense? Okay. Thanks, Rachel. Sybil says, hey, everyone, just waiting here for this dreaded hurricane coming our way. Well, I hope you're going to get through it safely. Thanks a lot, Rawia. Thanks. Okay, well, that's it from my side. I'm not sure what else I can tell you. Does anyone want to see Timmy before I skedaddle. We actually had a little bit of rain here. I must say, South Africa is looking extremely dusty. It's really like a dust bowl. It's so dry, and we just had the first little bits of rain tonight. Hopefully more to come. Timmy, come. Come, boy. Timmy, come. Come. Timmy, come. Hey, come. So, yeah, as I say, Timmy is really looking quite, well, he's looking quite good, but he definitely he's got the swamp smell. He was actually literally running through stinky black mud, and he really, when he does that, he transforms into a warthog like almost immediately. So I did wash him off, but he certainly still does have the swamp smell. Yeah, but it's not the end of the world. My graphic designer's got a dog that he's made friends with, and so the two of them get up to all sorts of mischief together. I'm not sure who's the bigger influence on the other. I would say probably her dog gets him to be more muddier than he would normally be, which is quite interesting. What is Run the World? So thanks, Run the World. I usually watch your videos with Dad, a career prosecutor in San Diego, retired 17 years. He has Alzheimer's. Sorry to hear that. But sharp as ever, discussing law and past legal events. I'll watch on replay with him. Thanks. Does your dad ever comment on what I'm saying? Does he disagree? What sort of comments does he say, as a career prosecutor? Yeah, no, it's definitely very stinky. But if you know dogs, they like being stinky. They actually like rolling in smells to, I guess it's an instinctive thing to camouflage their own smells. So, Timmy's just being his doggy self. Oh, that's a great compliment. Wow. Thanks so much. I don't know if that's true, but I do know more about the US law than I think a lot of folks seem to think that I do. That is good to hear. Thanks a lot for that. Tell him I say hi, and if you're watching, hello. Sally Vella, that's good. Okay. Sybil says, I'm so mad I missed most of this live. I'm going to replay after I get my jammies on. Okay. Yeah, there's more to tell you guys, but I'm going to keep my cards a little bit close to the chest on certain things. Bria, you know what I'm referring to. I'll be giving you a couple of updates on certain things as they happen, Bria. So be on the lookout. Okay. Thanks, guys, for being here. And I'll see you guys hopefully next Monday. I want to try and keep it on Mondays for the next crime news update. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Take care, and I'll see you guys next time.